I'm sure a lot of you guys will know just how much of a sucker I am for heavyweight boxing, and therefore it really shouldn't come as much of a surprise that this is the fight that I am probably most intrigued by on this card. And that's not to take away from the rest of the card and the rest of the fights, because it is really something special in my opinion. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, and it is stacked with fights that are, potentially barn burners. However, this fight just piques my interest that little bit more, and so that's why I want to focus on it first. And I think the reason why this fight interests me so much is probably down to the trajectory of both fighters. Both of them have had their trials and tribulations. They're really in different stages, I feel. Daniel Dubois is still seen as someone who's going to go on for a long time. He's kind of in between generations in terms of, you have the current generation, then you have the next generation, the younger guys. He seems to be kind of in both. I think that's really, in terms of age, he's more on the younger side, but in terms of when he turned pro, he's obviously been around for a decent amount of time, and he's kind of the front runner of that next generation in terms of experience, because he's obviously he's been in world title mix for a long time. And then Joseph Parker, once upon a time, was in a similar stage to Daniel Dubois, where he was in that next generation of heavyweights. He obviously became a champion, and yeah, he is where he is now, where he's really enjoying an Indian summer in his career, and it's interesting to see just how far he can take it. But nevertheless, both of these guys, they've had their ups and downs, they've been through their trials and tribulations, and recently they're both on a really good run of form. And you could say that both of them have captured their career best wins in their most recent fights. Of course, Joseph Parker's coming off of the wins over Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang, and Daniel Dubois, he beat Miller, beat Hergovich, beat AJ most recently. So both of them on some really good run of form, both of them carrying a lot of momentum. And I think stylistically as well, this is potentially an interesting fight, because I can see how both guys win. Initially, when this fight was announced, I want to say, firmly picking Daniel Dubois. And as this fight's come closer, I am starting to see how Joseph Parker could potentially win. Now, Joseph Parker's always been a fighter with a lot of ability. He's very experienced as well. Joseph Parker's main issue over the course of his career has been his lack of true fighting spirit. And it's always, you always have to preface it, because Joseph Parker is a very brave man. He's shown that in his career. He's a very tough man. He's never shied away from a challenge. At least at the top of my head, I can't remember a time where he was avoiding a fight, swerving it, ducking it, whatever. He's always been willing to get in there and give it his best shot. It's just, if he's in against a certain type of personality who's maybe trying to impose themselves on him, he doesn't always have the most fiery response. And I think we've seen it cost him a couple of times in his career. And I think that's been his main kind of hang up, is that he's a bit too much of a nice guy. And even now, in this point of his career, he's still referred to as one of the nicest guys in boxing. And yeah, that's going to be great for selling tickets and being really approachable with your fans. But in terms of practically, like, ultimately, you're in a fight, and so you need to have that dog. And also, I want to say that Joseph Parker, I do think stylistically, technically, and tactically, he's developed quite well, particularly under Andy Lee. It's been a very slow and steady progression, because there was once upon a time where Joseph Parker, who has always had a good degree of ability, sometimes he could be a bit uncultured, but that was more so when he had to close a fighter down if he was in against a taller, rangier guy who was moving around, and Parker was forced to press the issue and come forward. Yeah, it usually devolve into him not really cutting off the ring that well, but then when he managed to get his guy up against the ropes, he'd just try and bowl over these overhand rights. And it was very uncultured, it wasn't very educated, and a lot of the technique just went out the window. But I think he's really developed, and Joseph Parker's kind of one of those wily old veterans. I think that's the best way to describe him. And I think if we look at this matchup stylistically, Daniel Dubois is most likely going to look to press the issue on Joseph Parker. So potentially you could say that it won't expose those previous flaws that I feel Joseph Parker had, and something that really kept him back. If Daniel Dubois is going to be looking to push the issue on Joseph Parker, he could potentially play into his hands. Um, the only thing is, if we look at how Joseph Parker dealt with that from Zhang, there are some quite stark differences between Zhang and Daniel Dubois. And I rate Zhang. You guys will know he's probably one of my favourite heavyweights. Probably my favourite heavyweight to watch these days. Just stylistically, I think I really like his style. I get a lot of entertainment from watching him. But that being said, it's a different stylistic matchup to Daniel Dubois, who, for my money, Daniel Dubois isn't as... He's not as seasoned a fighter. He is experienced, but I just think Zhang, he's got really good fundamentals. And I think he's a bit more advanced. You know, I think he has a few more routes. His offense is a little bit more high IQ. And I just think his skill set is a bit more diverse. I'll hold my hands up, though. I have been guilty of selling Dubois short, I feel. I picked against him in his most recent fights. I thought Miller would beat him. I thought Hrgovic would beat him. I thought AJ would beat him. And, you know, three predictions on the trot, and they've all been incorrect. So I do have to hold my hands up and start to take notice of Daniel Dubois, because I've just always seen him as being quite basic. And I do think he is. You know, his approach to boxing, it's all very ABC. But I think he certainly proved me wrong in the sense that there's nothing wrong with that if you have the mindset and the physicality to really get the most out of a fairly basic but consistent skill set. And I think Daniel Dubois definitely does that. He's got a lot of momentum, a lot of confidence right now. And he's someone who will engage. You know, he will go for you. He's not particularly shy. And this is, once again, maybe a little bit jarring considering the fact that he's quit twice in his career. And that really lends into how impressive it is that Daniel Dubois is in where he is now, because coming off of his career best wins with a lot of momentum, after the Usyk fight, people were saying that Dubois might be for the scrap heap unless he kind of turns it around in a big way, but he's done that. But nevertheless, getting back to the original point, stylistically, Dubois has shown that with a fairly basic offense and defense, I don't think he's not particularly gifted defensively. In fact, I'll say he can be awful defensively. Offensively, he's got a good selection of shots, although it is behind a relatively basic stepping forward, using the jab. It's very GB amateur, but he's very physical, very explosive, very strong. Not the quickest guy necessarily, but foot speed, he can close you down fairly quickly. And he's got good work capacity, so he's always going to be dangerous. So you really have to nail Daniel Dubois to get his respect and hurt him. But even then, we've seen him hurt, and he'll still go for it afterwards. So he's willing to let it all hang out and roll the dice, which makes him dangerous, certainly. And casting our minds back to September when he fought AJ, a lot of people saw that as a dangerous fight for AJ, because there was never going to be much of a chance of him standing up to the offense of Daniel Dubois from a punch resistance perspective. But people said, including myself, if he can just nail Daniel Dubois with something, just get out of the early rounds, maybe he takes a couple of jabs and is a bit more defensive but starts to counter Dubois, AJ should have enough power to keep Dubois honest. And we saw a glimpse of it, in that last round, when AJ just managed to land that right hand. Didn't even seem particularly flush, but AJ, a big man, a big puncher, managed to get Dubois going again a little bit, but ultimately it wasn't enough. And Dubois wasn't that badly hurt, because he is a tough man, at least physically. And we saw, though, that you can back him up. Can Joseph Parker do that? I don't think so. Joseph Parker is a wily fighter, knows his way around a ring. And I think especially now, he knows how to keep himself safe. We saw that against Wilder, who, yes, was faded, but Joseph Parker just had that way of moving around the ring, managing the distance really well, slipping and sliding, setting up his shots. Still a little bit slapping here and there. I don't think Joseph Parker's offense is really refined, which could cost him here. Same thing against Zhang. who a monster puncher as well with both hands, very accomplished counter puncher especially. Joseph Parker got knocked down twice, but didn't have any issues standing in front of Zhang and setting up his own shots. So I think Joseph Parker's going to have success in this fight. I think he's tough enough, and I think he's wily enough to last the distance. So I think this will be a long fight. I'm not sure how it will be, how the pace will be. I think it might be a slower one where there are moments where both guys maybe get a foothold in the fight and it heats up a little bit. But I think for the most part, it's probably not going to be rock'em sock'em robots. But ultimately, if we want to talk about predictions, I just think that Dubois is a bit more. He's a bit more well. He's very, very much more well conditioned or better conditioned than Zhilei Zhang, so his output's going to be higher. He definitely has more of a hunger for battle than Deontay Wilder, so I think it is going to be a tougher ask for Joseph Parker. Parker, I do think, has the skill and the experience to win this fight, although I'm just not confident that he has the authority on his punches and his offense to keep Dubois honest enough to win enough rounds or hurt Dubois. And so for that reason, I think Dubois is just going to be more authoritative in the fight. I think he's going to win more rounds and ultimately just boss the fight for the majority of it and probably pick up a comfortable unanimous decision. Yeah, I'm not going to go for a stoppage in this one. Of course, either guy could win. Dubois could stop Parker. I think it would be quite unlikely if Parker stopped Dubois. But yeah, I think Parker's tough enough, game enough, and wily enough to last the distance, but ultimately will fall short. And Daniel Dubois will continue on as IBF heavyweight champion. Those are my thoughts. Leave yours in the comment section below. What do you think of this fight? What do you make of my breakdown and prediction? I'm going with Daniel Dubois, unanimous decision. Leave your thoughts down below and I'll get back to you for now. Thanks for listening and I'll catch you in the next video.